Okay, let's just dive right into this. Look, we have all heard the standard ghost stories.
Right.
You know the ones, the bumps in the night, the sudden cold spots, maybe a door slamming on its own when the wind blows.
The classic haunted house setup.
Exactly. A family buys an old Victorian mansion, they find a spooky doll in the attic, and things get a little weird. But what we are looking at today for this deep dive, this is not that.
Not even close.
No.
I mean, if you're tuning in looking for a simple campfire story to give you a little shiver, you really might want to check out a different deep dive.
Yeah.
Because this isn't a ghost story. We are looking at a massive stack of sources here regarding the Moffat family. And honestly, reading through these files, it reads less like a haunting and more like a tactical military strike from the other side.
Tactical strike. That is a really intense way to put it, but it fits perfectly.
It is a siege.
Yeah.
That is really the only technical demonological term that actually fits what happened here. Right. Because when you look at the progression of the phenomena in the Moffat case, this is out in Rancho Cucamonga in California, stretching from the late 80s right into the early 90s, you are not seeing a restless human spirit just wandering the halls looking for peace.
No, you're really not.
You're looking at a highly calculated stage 4 demonic infestation, and it borders on full possession. I mean, it is aggressive, it's incredibly intelligent, and it is absolutely unrelenting.
It's terrifying is what it is. So let's just set the stage for you listening right now. We are talking about the Moffat family.
Right.
You've got Bill Jr., his wife Deborah, his father Bill Sr., and the matriarch of the family, Lee. And they are all living in this sort of compound. It's 3 houses, all situated on a single lot.
Right, in Rancho Cucamonga. And what makes this case so deeply unique and frankly completely disturbing to anyone who studies demonology seriously is the sheer intelligence behind the attacks.
Yeah, the entity itself.
Exactly. The family colloquially called it Mr. Entity for a long time.
Which, I mean, I almost feel like that was just a coping mechanism, right? To normalize the absolute horror they were living with.
Oh, absolutely. Calling it Mr. Entity makes it sound like a nuisance neighbor. But eventually, this thing drops the mask entirely and identifies itself as a prince.
A prince.
A prince. And look, in the strict hierarchy of demonology, especially when you look at the established classifications from the 16th and 17th centuries, that is not a title you just throw around lightly.
Right, this isn't some low-level trickster.
No, we aren't dealing with a confused human spirit or a minor elemental. We are dealing with a high-ranking ancient malevolence that commands massive authority.
And so the mission for this deep dive today is to figure out exactly how this happened. Because you have to wonder, how do you go from living a totally normal life in the California suburbs to suddenly having actual knives materializing in your bed?
Or messages scrolled on your bathroom mirrors, literally demanding murder.
Yes, exactly. We need to trace this whole nightmare from the very first point of infestation all the way through the oppression to what the case files call the blood ritual.
A blood ritual.
Yeah.
That is the absolute key to this entire case. It's the tether. But to really understand the ritual, we have to understand the geography of the property and really the initial breach.
The origin point.
Right.
So let's rewind a bit. Let's go all the way back to the catalyst. The year is 1984. The location is Archibald Avenue. We have these 3 houses sitting on one single lot.
Which is definitely important for the isolation factor here. You have to realize they are in their own little world on that lot, their own ecosystem.
It creates a pressure cooker environment.
A perfect pressure cooker.
Right. So the inciting incident here seems to revolve around the grandmother, Domenica.
Yeah.
She is very sick, she's dying, and the family decides to hire a live-in caretaker named Juanita. Now, this is where the source material gets incredibly specific about the actual method of entry for this entity.
Juanita is the pivot point. There's no getting around it. According to the case files, Juanita was an active practitioner of Santeria.
Okay, and we need to pause here and be incredibly careful about how we frame this.
Absolutely. Santeria is a completely legitimate syncretic religion with very deep historical roots. We are absolutely not here to demonize the faith itself.
Right, we are just looking at the mechanics of what happened in this specific instance.
Exactly, because in demonology, intent and execution are everything. And Juanita was desperate. She desperately needed Domenica to stay alive so she could keep her work visa and her job.
I think her direct quote from the files was, "I was only trying to help."
I was only trying to help. It is the classic road to hell paved with good intentions. To save Domenica, Juanita allegedly decides to perform a ritual. But it wasn't a ritual of worship or prayer. It was a binding ritual.
She was trying to force life to stay inside a dying body.
Yes. But she isn't a master practitioner. She is acting entirely out of sheer panic.
And in that desperate state, the sources heavily suggest she accidentally opened a door that she had absolutely no idea how to close.
She didn't invite healing energy. She basically tore a hole right through the veil.
She created a portal. And the evidence for this, it isn't subtle at all. We aren't talking about, a bad feeling in the room or a sudden chill in the air. When the family finally goes into Domenica's house after she inevitably passes away, what they find is essentially a spiritual crime scene.
It's a blast zone.
It really is. They find blood splatter all over the walls. There are feathers scattered everywhere across the floor, broken rosary beads.
Which is a massive red flag.
A huge sign of desecration. Breaking holy objects is textbook demonic posturing. And they also found strange symbols physically carved deep into the drywall. This was pure chaotic magic. And the result was practically immediate.
Because Juanita didn't just sense a presence in that house, she was physically chased out.
Chased out of the house by a completely visible ball of energy. And before she fled for good, she specifically warned Lee, right, the mother-in-law. She told her, never enter this house.
She did. And that warning is honestly chilling, because it implies that Juanita knew exactly what she had led into that space. She knew it wasn't just Domenica's ghost lingering around. She knew it was something predatory.
She recognized she had completely lost control of the situation.
Precisely.
And this is where human nature gets really interesting. Life kind of just goes on for the Moffat family for a bit. They clean up the grandmother's house. They paint over the symbols. They try to just move forward.
Denial is a powerful thing.
It really is. But the infection, if we want to look at it like a disease, it starts spreading.
Yeah.
But it doesn't go straight for the main family immediately. It starts testing the perimeter. It goes after the renters.
This is what demonologists refer to as the renter period in this case.
Yeah.
And it is a perfect textbook example of an entity testing its boundaries. It is highly territorial. It wants to see exactly what it can get away with before it strikes at the absolute heart of the compound.
So let's talk about Danny. Danny is the guy who ends up renting Bill Jr.'s old house on the lot. And May Jr. had left this locked room in the house, right? It was full of his sports memorabilia. It was his personal sanctuary.
The locked room. Now think about that. A lock is a physical barrier. To a spirit or an entity, a physical lock means absolutely nothing. They exist outside of normal physical matter.
Right, they can just move right through the door.
Exactly. But to a demon, purposefully breaching a locked room isn't about overcoming a physical obstacle. It's a bold statement of dominance. It is pure psychological warfare. It's saying your boundaries mean nothing to me.
And what Danny finds when he eventually goes in there, it is so bizarrely specific. The bobbleheads.
The bobbleheads?
He walks into this locked room, and his collectible bobbleheads have been taken off the shelf and carefully arranged on the floor in a perfect triangle formation.
A triangle. That right there is a major recurring motif in this entire case. In occult symbology, a triangle is a structure of manifestation. It can represent a gateway, or a prison, or even a summoning circle.
But in this context,
it's a signature. It is the entity distinctly saying, I can touch your things. I can move them with absolute precision. I am intelligent. Look, this is not random poltergeist activity where things are just being thrown around the room in a tantrum. This was ordered. It was deliberate.
And poor Danny is basically getting gaslit by a demon at this point. The family thinks he's messing with their stuff. He firmly denies doing it. But then the apportation starts.
Apportation, yes, that is the technical term. It's the ability of a high-level entity to dematerialize a physical object in one location and rematerialize it somewhere else.
Right. So Danny's personal wallet and his watch suddenly disappear from inside his locked rental house, and they reappear right on Lee's prayer altar next door in the main house.
And we really need to connect this to the bigger picture. Ask yourself, why Lee's altar? Why there of all places?
Because Lee is the matriarch. She's the deeply religious core of the family.
Exactly. She is the spiritual center. The entity is purposefully taking personal items from the invaded territory, Danny's house, and placing them directly onto holy ground. It is an act of blatant desecration. It's a direct challenge to her faith.
It's mocking her. Your holy objects can't keep me out. Your personal sanctuary is fully accessible to me.
Precisely. And Danny isn't an idiot. He senses that there is a predator in the house with him. He doesn't stick around waiting for some spectral face to scream at him from a dark corner. He completely flees. He gives them 24 hours notice and just says, I'm out.
And right after he leaves, the family goes in and they find these strange crayon symbols drawn all over the light switches.
Crayon symbols. I know it sounds almost childish on the surface, but in this specific context, it is deeply sinister. It feels like a total corruption of innocence.
It really does. But honestly, Danny got off incredibly easy compared to the people who rented the house next, Tom and Michelle. Because this part of the timeline, this is where we transition from things just being spooky to actual potential homicide.
This is where we see the very real, very dangerous influence of demonic obsession. In demonology, right before you get to full-blown possession, there's often a prolonged period of obsession.
Where the entity starts messing with their mind.
Right. It aggressively influences the emotions and the baseline personality of the victim. It amplifies all their negative traits. And according to the sources, Tom goes from being this generally gentle guy to someone incredibly violent. The oppressive atmosphere of that house is effectively poisoning his mind.
And Michelle pays the ultimate price for it.
The tragedy of Michelle is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
She completely disappears. Tom abruptly packs up and leaves the property. And then sometime later, this total stranger shows up at the Moffat compound looking for her.
And he tells them this horrific story.
He claims that Michelle was found beaten to death, dumped in a landfill, and her body was wrapped in a very specific rug. A rug that the Moffat family suddenly realizes is missing from that exact rental house.
That detail about the rug just gives me absolute chills. They knew the rug was gone, but they hadn't put two and two together until that stranger arrived with the news. It ties the rental location directly to her murder. But here is the kicker, and I really want your professional take on this.
Okay.
The family is freaking out. Obviously, they want to go to the police. They want to report all this insane activity and the missing rug. And Bill Sr., the grandfather, he completely shuts it down.
Don't get involved. That was his strict command to the family.
And allegedly, this is because of his mafia connections, right?
Yeah.
Source materials mention he had deep ties to the mob and absolutely did not want any police heat on his property.
That is the alleged surface-level reason. No cops on the property.
Yeah.
But if we analyze this through the strict lens of the demonic haunting, Bill Sr. intentionally isolating his family from the authorities, from any kind of outside help, that is exactly what the entity wants.
Isolation is the goal.
Isolation is absolutely key to a successful demonic siege. By keeping the police away, he kept his family trapped inside that pressure cooker. Whether he fully realized it at the time or not, Bill Sr. was actively acting as the entity's gatekeeper.
Wow. So the family's just terrified. They finally reach a breaking point and decide, okay, we are selling. We are selling this entire compound. We have to get out of Archibald Avenue. They truly believe the property itself is the problem.
Which is a classic mistake victims make. You naturally assume the physical house is haunted. You don't realize that you are the target. You don't realize the attachment is personal, not geographical.
And the entity makes absolutely sure they understand this on their very last day there, the kitchen explosion incident.
That was a massive, unprecedented show of kinetic force, ripping heavy wooden cupboards right off the walls, shattering every single window in the bedroom at the exact same time.
That's not just a weird draft.
No, that requires a physical energy discharge that is completely off the charts. That is pure rage. It is a literal temper tantrum from the entity because its prey is trying to leave the hunting ground.
But they do leave, they pack up, they move to a new house, and for a very brief minute, they actually think they're safe. But then phase 2 begins. The mirror.
The infestation completely follows them to the new house. And now, the direct communication begins. This is where the entity establishes a very clear, direct line to the family.
The mirror writing. This becomes the primary mode of communication for this thing. It uses soap on the bathroom mirrors.
Soap is a highly interesting medium for an entity to use. It's organic, it is readily available in the room, but it requires extreme dexterity to write legibly with it.
Right.
And this thing wasn't just scribbling abstract lines, it was writing clear, highly intelligent messages in English.
Talk to me. That was the very first message they found.
Which is a trap. The moment you answer an entity, you validate its existence. You give it your attention, and in the spiritual realm, attention is energy.
Talk to me. Then it escalates to no escape, then fools, and then it gets deeply personal. It starts writing, I hate Lee, and Lee die.
This strictly indicates high intelligence and very specific, malicious intent. Residual energy, like a simple recording of a past traumatic event playing on a loop, doesn't write, talk to me, in soap.
Right, a ghost take doesn't adapt.
Exactly, it doesn't respond to your questions. This entity was actively engaging in a dialogue with them. It was taunting them. And notice the specific target of its rage, Lee.
Why Lee? We touched on the altar desecration earlier, but this really seems like a deep personal vendetta against her.
It is a vendetta. Lee represents the light in that family. She was the deeply religious one, the glue holding everyone's sanity together. From a tactical standpoint, if you break the matriarch, you completely break the family unit. This is the transition into full oppression, the systematic crushing of the human will. And the attacks on Lee weren't just psychological mirror messages, they escalated into severe physical assaults.
The knives. This is honestly one of the most terrifying details in all the sources we reviewed. Knives literally appearing inside chair cushions just seconds before she sits down. Knives materializing under her covers in her bed. It's like the entity was playing a sick game of Russian roulette with her, but using kitchen cutlery.
It's pure terrorism. It is specifically designed to make her feel completely unsafe in her own sanctuary. You can't sit down, you can't sleep, you can't even relax for a second. Every single mundane moment is a moment of potential violent pain. And then it escalates to the pantry incident.
Oh God, the pantry!
She is violently dragged into the kitchen pantry by completely invisible hands and leaves highly visible red marks all over her throat.
It's choking her.
That is physical assault. That is the entity moving from just manipulating objects like the bobbleheads and the knives to actually physically grappling with a human being. That is a massive, dangerous escalation. It means the entity has gathered enough ambient energy to overpower a person.
And the family's isolation just ramps up to an extreme level at this point. They're all sleeping together in one single room, right?
They have this massive new house, but they are huddled together in one room, like frightened refugees in a war zone. That is the ultimate psychological toll of demonic oppression. You have completely surrendered your own territory to the entity. You have ceded the house to the enemy.
I really want to talk about Gary Kent for a second here, because this guy, he is a paranormal investigator. He comes in and he actively challenges the entity. He really plays the classic hero archetype, walking straight into the monster's den, and the entity practically just laughs right in his face.
It did a lot more than laugh.
Yeah.
It systematically dismantled him.
Yeah.
Gary Kent represents the classic exorcist archetype trying to intervene and save the day, and the entity damply humiliated him just to show everyone its absolute superiority.
The shredding of his clothes right off his body. But the really disturbing part? The hair, the snipping sound.
Imagine sitting at the breakfast table. You hear a very distinct sound right next to your ear. Snip, snip, snip. And then large clumps of your own hair just fall right onto the table in front of you.
It is so deeply violating.
It is a profound display of absolute dominance. It's the entity saying, I can touch you, I can cut you, I can alter your physical body, and you can't even see me to fight back. It completely strips away all of his perceived power.
And then later on, a fully loaded shotgun just appears in Gary's bed.
A blatant death threat. Plain and simple. Leave this house right now or the next time, and the trigger gets pulled. It's almost using mafia-style intimidation tactics, oddly enough, mirroring Bill Sr.'s alleged background.
That's a really good point. So we have this intense physical violence, we have the sheer psychological terror, but we really need to look at Bill Sr. much deeper. Because you mentioned the term the permitter earlier. What exactly does that mean in a strict demonological context?
The permitter theory is absolutely crucial to understanding why this case lasted so long. Eventually, the famous demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in to investigate.
Right, the Warren files.
Yes. And Lorraine, who is incredibly clairvoyant and sensitive to these specific frequencies, immediately identified the presence of an ancient demon. But she also realized a terrifying truth. They couldn't just perform a cleansing and kick it out.
Why not?
Because someone currently living inside the house had not only opened the door, but was actively keeping it open.
And all the signs pointed straight to Bill Sr.
Look at the bizarre behavior documented in the case files. He starts aggressively sleepwalking. He is heard literally howling like a wolf in the middle of the night.
Wait, howling, like full-on howling at the moon.
Literal, guttural howling. Animalistic behavior like that is a very classic, documented sign of diabolic obsession or even partial possession. The higher human rational mind is being suppressed by the entity, and the primal animalistic brain is being heavily stimulated. During one of the rituals, he actually threatened to bite Ed Warren's hand completely off.
That is definitely not normal behavior for a suburban grandfather.
No. And the sources also strongly mention he was caught trying to erase the threatening messages off the bathroom mirror before the rest of the family could see them.
Yeah.
He was hiding the evidence.
Wow! So he was actively colluding with it.
Exactly. Now, the big theological question is, was he doing it consciously? Or was his mind so broken down, so heavily obsessed by this point, that he was just acting as a meat puppet? The shamans who visited, and Dr. Evelyn Paglini, they both suggested it all came down to simple human greed.
The inheritance money.
Right. If Lee dies, Bill Sr. stands to inherit the money.
So the entity effectively uses his deep greed as a hook. It's whispering to him, I will kill her, you will get all the money, just give me permission to stay here.
It is a dark transaction. Demons are entirely transactional beings. They do not do things for free. They operate on spiritual legalism. They need a yes. And Bill Sr., whether consciously or subconsciously, was constantly saying yes. He was the human battery actively charging the entire haunting.
Which naturally brings us right into phase 3, the grand why of it all. Because at some point, Mr. Entity stops being just Mr. Entity and starts demanding to be called a prince.
Dr. Evelyn Paglini, who is a very well-respected parapsychologist and an expert demonologist, she analyzed the evidence and identified this entity as one of the 7 princes of hell.
Man, that is incredibly heavy.
If her diagnosis is correct, and the severity of the attacks suggests it is, this ordinary family from California was dealing with a level in the hierarchy of evil that most people cannot even begin to comprehend. This isn't just a demonic foot soldier, this is a general.
And this specific prince claims it has a literal contractual right to Lee's soul. This is where the whole story shifts from a scary 1980s haunting into this massive, centuries-old historical drama.
The Covenant.
The entity actually tells him a story through the mirror, right? It takes him back to 17th century France, inside a monastery, where supposed satanic rituals were taking place.
The narrative provided directly by the entity is that rogue monks in this French monastery performed dark rituals, specifically to bind a young nun as a blood sacrifice to this prince. But the sacrifice was interrupted, it was never completed. The nun actually managed to escape.
And the entity claims that Lee is the direct reincarnation of that escaped nun.
She belongs to me. That is its core underlying claim. The spiritual debt was never paid in blood. I have finally found her again.
And it gets crazier because where does Gary Kent fit into this past life?
The entity claimed Gary Kent was the reincarnation of the priest who originally helped the nun escape.
It is just incredible. It entirely frames the haunting not as some random string of bad paranormal luck, but as a highly coordinated debt collection. It's a repo man from hell coming back centuries later for a soul.
And this is exactly why it suddenly demanded a blood ritual. It wasn't enough for the entity to just scare Lee to death with flying knives. It legally needed a ritualistic completion of the original 17th century contract. It needed the literal blood that was promised to it all those years ago. The spear.
This is wild. A brand new, highly ornate African ritual spearhead just magically appears inside their locked house. It's a massive apport.
A literal weapon of execution. It didn't belong to a single person in the family. It just manifested out of thin air.
And then come the specific instructions on the mirror. The entity demands that Deborah, the daughter-in-law, she has to be the one to pick up the spear and literally stab Lee directly in the heart.
You really have to stop and think about the pure, calculated cruelty of that demand. It actively wants Deborah to become the murderer. It wants to completely destroy 2 human souls at the exact same time. Lee physically dies, and Deborah's soul is forever corrupted by committing murder.
It's maximum corruption. It's not just about getting the death it wants. It's about generating as much sin as possible in the process. It wants to utterly corrupt the living family members. And when Deborah obviously refuses to do this insane act,
The entity writes a new message. Lee will die in 10 days.
countdown.
A strict deadline. And guess what? Exactly 10 days later to the day Lee is rushed to the hospital, severe heart failure, massive pneumonia. She is completely on death's door.
But she survives.
She survives, and the source files mention a very specific detail here. While she was coating the hospital bed, she saw a clear vision of her dead mother, Dominica. She described seeing a bright white mist actively fighting back a towering black shape in the hospital room.
It's literally like a spiritual war playing out right there in the ICU.
It absolutely is, and her miraculous survival completely broke the momentum of the demonic ritual. The entity very publicly called his shot. She said 10 days, and he missed. In the spiritual realm, that is a massive sign of weakness. It proved to the Moffat family that this so-called prince was not actually omnipotent.
So how does this whole nightmare finally end? Because they lived through absolute hell for 5 long years, from 1987 to 1992.
It ultimately ends with the forced removal of the perimeter.
Bill's
Right. The family finally wakes up and realizes the absolute toxicity of Bill Sr.'s presence in the house. He is eventually hospitalized for a severe mental evaluation, which then leads to a divorce, and he is terminally removed from the family home.
And the second he is gone, the battery is removed.
Exactly. The entity completely lost its legal anchor in the physical world. It lost the one person on the inside who was constantly saying yes.
But Gary Kent, we have to talk about what Gary does at the end here. Poor Gary tries one last absolutely insane Hail Mary.
A completely desperate and frankly foolish move for an investigator. In 1992, Gary is officially packing up and leaving the case to go back to England, and he actually asks the demonic entity to come with him.
Why in the world would he ever do that after the hair snipping incident, after waking up with a shotgun in his bed?
Because of the oldest human flaw, the desire for power. He genuinely thought he could harness its energy. It is the exact same trap that Bill Sr. fell into. Gary thought, if I can somehow control this ancient prince, imagine the power I could have. It is the ultimate hubris of man thinking he could just put a tight leash on a monster.
And how did the entity respond to his invitation?
It was brutal. It flatly refuses. It writes on the mirror, calling Gary an inferior being. It had absolutely no interest in him whatsoever. It only ever wanted Lee.
Wow. But eventually, with Bill Sr. completely gone from the picture and Gary leaving for Europe, the severe activity actually stops, and the final message it leaves is just, goodbye, my family.
Which is such a chilling goodbye. Notice the phrasing, not, I have been banished by the light, not, I am defeated, just goodbye. It's like a satisfied guest casually checking out of a hotel room.
Right. So what does this all mean when we step back, when we actively compare the Moffat case to other major hauntings, say the Amityville Horror or the Enfield Poltergeist?
It really stands completely alone. Look, Amityville was fundamentally about a place. The house itself had a dark memory. Enfield was largely about a noisy poltergeist focusing its chaotic energy on a pubescent child. But the Moffat case, this is a highly organized, multi-generational vendetta involving a very specific demand for ritualistic murder, the spearing, and an incredibly sophisticated theological backstory about a broken covenant.
For me, it's the sheer duration that really gets under my skin. 5 years of nonstop attacks. Thousands of individual messages written in soap.
And you really have to remember the perimeter variable. This entire case serves as a massive warning to anyone studying this field. You can bless the house 100 times, you can burn all the sage in the world, you can even call in Ed and Lorraine Warren. But if someone inside your own circle is secretly feeding the beast, if someone is silently inviting it in because they secretly harbor greed or a lust for power, or they're just full of dark resentment, absolutely nothing will work to get rid of it.
The weak link breaks the whole chain.
The traitor inside the walls is always the most dangerous element.
And the really scary part to me is the postscript of this whole thing. Gary Kent actually reported seeing that exact same triangle symbol carved onto his front door after he moved back to England.
Which just proves it lingers. Ancient high-level energy like that doesn't just vanish into thin air just because you moved away. It disperses and it waits.
So here is where it gets really interesting for you listening right now. The Moffat family kept this entire ordeal a complete secret for decades. They didn't rush out to write a best-selling book immediately. They didn't go on some big daytime talk show press tour. They just hid in pure terror.
Which naturally adds a massive layer of credibility to their claims. They were genuinely deeply traumatized by what happened to them.
But the big question really remains, if this entity actually was a prince of hell, and if that centuries-old blood debt was technically never paid, is it truly gone? Or is it just biding its time?
It's likely just waiting for the absolute perfect next bloodline opportunity to present itself, waiting for a brand new permitter to say yes.
And that leads me to a final, slightly provocative thought for everyone listening to this deep dive today. We always look around for the scary monsters hiding under our beds or lurking deep in the dark closet. But this specific case teaches us something radically different.
What's that?
It teaches us that the real invitation for evil often comes directly from within our own homes, from our own families. So you really have to ask yourself, who or what are you unknowingly inviting into your own life through your own deep-seated resentments, through your own secret, selfish desires?
And if you do let something in, are you absolutely sure you have the power to close that door once you've opened it?
Something to think about. Sleep well, everyone.
Or try to.